You feel it the moment you press the gas. That little hesitation, that half second where the car should surge and instead it just sighs. You merge onto the highway and the engine strains like it's pulling a trailer that isn't there. You tell yourself it's the age of the car. You tell yourself it's the gas. You tell yourself it's just how it is now. It isn't. There is one valve buried under your hood, smaller than your thumb, that almost nobody cleans, and when it clogs it quietly chokes your engine, robs your power, and drains your fuel. And the fix costs less than a cup of coffee. I know that sounds impossible, I thought so too, but I chased this down myself, from a dusty repair shop in an Amish settlement all the way back to a military document from World War II, and what I found changed the way I take care of every engine I own. I'm going to show you exactly what it is, why they stopped teaching people to service it, and a 2-minute test with a scrap of paper that tells you if yours is strangling your engine right now. Stay with me, because the oldest trick I found for this came out of a 1940s shop manual, and it works in your driveway this weekend with nothing you don't already have. Let me take you back to where this started for me. About 3 years ago, my old pickup started acting sluggish. Rough idle in the morning, a shudder at the light, and my fuel gauge dropping faster than it should. So I did what you'd do. I took it to a shop. A young fellow plugged in his scanner, frowned at the screen, and told me I was probably looking at a fuel injection service, maybe a throttle body, maybe a mass airflow sensor, and if it kept up, possibly the catalytic converter. He wrote me an estimate. It was just under $900. I stood there in that fluorescent lit lobby, feeling like a fool who didn't understand his own truck. I didn't pay it. Something felt off. And a few days later I was out near a settlement in the eastern part of the state, the kind of place where the buggies still share the road with the trucks, and I got to talking with a man who ran a little engine repair operation behind his barn. Now, a lot of folks are surprised to learn the Amish work on engines at all, but they run diesel generators, water pumps, sawmills, refrigeration compressors, and plenty of them keep the vehicles that their hired drivers use in top running order. This man had grease under his nails going back 40 years, and when I described my truck's symptoms, he didn't reach for a scanner. He didn't quote me $900. He just wiped his hands, looked at me, and asked one question. When did you last service your breather valve? I had no idea what he was talking about. I'd owned cars my whole life, and I'd never once touched a breather valve. He walked me around to an engine he had sitting on a stand, pointed to a small plastic piece plugged into the top of it with a rubber grommet, and pulled it out. He shook it next to my ear. Silence. Dead silence. Then he showed me one from a clean engine and shook that one. It rattled. A light, healthy click, 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 like a little pill in a bottle. That sound, he said, is the sound of your engine breathing. Yours stopped breathing a long time ago. That valve has a name. It's called the PCV valve, positive crankcase ventilation, and I'm telling you, in decades of owning vehicles, no mechanic had ever once mentioned it to me. But that quiet moment behind a barn sent me down a rabbit hole I didn't expect, because when I got home and started reading, I discovered this little valve wasn't invented to save the engine at all. It was invented for something else entirely, and that's where the story gets strange. Here's what I dug up, and it surprised me. That valve on top of your engine traces its roots straight back to the military in World War II. When Army tanks and heavy machinery had to ford deep water or grind through choking dust and mud, engineers had a serious problem. Every engine produces what they call blow-by, a small amount of pressure and fumes that sneak past the piston rings down into the crankcase, the lower part of the engine where your oil lives. In an ordinary engine of that era, they just vented those fumes out into the open air through a simple pipe called a road draft tube. But a tank crossing a river couldn't have an open tube sucking water straight into the engine. So the engineers designed a sealed, one-way ventilation valve that let the engine breathe out its own pressure without letting anything back in. A small brass and spring device that opened and closed with the engine's vacuum. Simple, brilliant, and it kept those engines alive in conditions that would have destroyed them. That's the ancestor of the valve sitting in your car right now. Then came 1961. The state of California, choking on smog, looked at all those open-road draft tubes venting raw fumes into the air over Los Angeles and said enough. The California Motor Vehicle Pollution Control Board mandated that every new car sold in the state had to route those crankcase fumes back into the engine to be burned instead of dumped into the sky. And the device they chose to do it was that same little military-born one-way valve. By 1964, it was on nearly every car built in America. Positive crankcase ventilation, the PCV valve. Now here's the part that stopped me cold. The engineers of that era discovered something they hadn't even been aiming for. By constantly pulling those hot, moisture-laden acidic fumes out of the crankcase and burning them, the valve was keeping the engine oil dramatically cleaner. It was preventing sludge. It was stopping the acids that eat away at bearings. Studies from that period found that engines fitted with this ventilation ran cleaner and lasted longer, with far less of the black tar that used to gum up motors by 50,000 miles. A part invented to keep water out of a tank turned out to be one of the greatest engine life extenders ever put under a hood. And almost nobody cleans it. Think about that. A device that determines whether your engine breathes freely or slowly strangles on its own fumes. A device that keeps your oil clean and your power up. And it hides under a rubber grommet the size of a quarter, forgotten. But understanding what it does was only half of what I needed, because the real question was gnawing at me. If this valve is that important, why had no mechanic in my whole life ever told me to service it? That answer, when I found it, made me genuinely angry. Let me tell you what happens when this valve clogs, because this is where the money starts bleeding out of your wallet without you ever knowing why. When that little valve gums up, and it gums up with oil vapor, carbon, and a kind of varnish that bakes on over time, it stops opening and closing the way it should. And when it can't breathe out, the pressure has nowhere to go. Those hot fumes back up into your crankcase. Now the moisture and acid that were supposed to be pulled out and burned instead sit in your oil and turn it into sludge. That sludge coats everything. It clogs the tiny passages that feed oil to your engine's moving parts. And here is the cruel part. The very failure that a $2 cleaning would have prevented now shows up as a $2,000 problem. But it gets worse before it shows up as sludge. A stuck valve throws off the delicate balance of air your engine is expecting. Your engine's computer is measuring every breath of air coming in. When that valve is stuck open, you get too much air sneaking in, and the engine idles rough and shakes at the light. Exactly what my truck was doing. When it's stuck closed, the pressure builds until it finds another way out, and that way out is your seals and your gaskets. That backed up pressure pushes on the rubber seals around your engine until they weep oil, and then leak oil, and then blow out completely. I have read account after account on repair forums of people who paid $600, $800, $1,000 to replace a rear main seal or a valve cover gasket, and not one of them was ever told that a clogged $10 valve was very likely what pushed that seal out in the first place. That's the cost of not knowing. Rough idle you blame on age. Lost power you blame on the gas. Oil spots on your driveway you blame on the car getting old. A check engine light you pay a shop to chase. Fuel economy quietly sliding, and I found reports of people regaining as much as 1 to 2 miles per gallon just from restoring this one valve, which over a year of driving is real money back in your pocket. All of it traced back to a part you can hold between 2 fingers. So why doesn't anybody tell you? Here's what I came to understand, and I want to be careful and fair about it. It isn't one grand conspiracy. It's something quieter and honestly worse. A modern shop doesn't make money teaching you to spend $2 in 10 minutes. There's no profit in handing you back your own power. The whole machine of modern car service is built around selling you the big job, the injection service, the throttle body, the sensor, the gasket you wouldn't have needed if somebody had shown you this valve when it mattered. The knowledge didn't get banned. It just got left out. It fell through the cracks because nobody could bill you for it. And an entire generation of drivers grew up never hearing the words their grandfathers knew. That's the part that still sits heavy with me, friend, because this valve is only one of dozens of small, cheap, forgotten things that a counterman will never point out to you. So after chasing this stuff down for years, I sat and wrote it all out myself, 3 books full of it, more than 390 pages of plain answers on reading your own warning light, catching a padded estimate before you ever sign it, and keeping an old car breathing well past 150,000 miles with what's already in your cabinet and your garage. What you're getting free in this video is one thread. In the books you get the whole cloth. The checklists, the case files, the seasonal habits, laid out step by step so you never stand in a fluorescent lobby feeling foolish again. If you want that in your hands this weekend, scan the QR code right there on your screen. Link in the description, pinned comment. The collection is waiting. Now, back to that old man behind the barn, because he never needed any of this explained to him. But that old Amish mechanic knew. Because in a world where you fix what you have and you don't throw money at a dealer, the small cheap part that saves the big expensive one is the whole philosophy. That's the thread I kept pulling, and it led me to something even simpler that most people have never heard of. Now I want to talk directly to you for a minute, because I know exactly what some of you are thinking right now. You're thinking, that's fine for a man with a barn and 40 years of grease under his nails, but I don't know a wrench from a screwdriver, and I'm not about to start tearing my engine apart in the driveway. I hear you. My wife said the same thing when I told her about this. So let me tell you plainly, this next part is for you, the one who has never opened the hood except to fill the washer fluid. You can do everything I'm about to describe with things already in your house, in about the time it takes to make a pot of coffee, and you will not damage a thing. Here's how you find it. Pop your hood. On top of your engine you'll see a large cover, usually the widest flat part, and it's called the valve cover. Somewhere on or near that cover you're looking for a small valve, often plastic, sometimes metal, plugged into a rubber grommet, with a hose running off of it. On a lot of engines it's about the size of your thumb, and it pulls straight out of that rubber grommet with a firm wiggle. Some newer engines tuck it in a harder spot, and I'll be honest with you, a few modern cars have gone to a sealed system with no serviceable valve at all, and if that's yours, this simply doesn't apply and you've lost nothing by looking. But the vast majority of vehicles on the road, especially anything with some years on it, still have this valve right there waiting for you. Your owner's manual, or a 2-second search of your exact car, will point to it. Once you have it in your hand, do the very test that Amish Mechanic did for me. Shake it next to your ear. If you hear a clean rattle, a little metal pin moving freely inside, that valve is breathing. If it's silent, or it feels sticky and gummed, you have just found something no shop ever charged you to find. And here's how you clean it. No skills required. Get yourself a small can of carburetor cleaner or throttle body cleaner, a few dollars at any parts store or hardware store. Set the valve in an old jar or coffee can. Spray it down inside and out, let it soak for a bit, and work it until you can shake it and hear that pin rattle free and clean again. If it's truly caked and won't come clean, don't fight it. A brand new one is usually somewhere between $5 and $15, and you plug the new one right back into the same grommet it came out of. That's it. No computer, no lift, no appointment. You just did the thing they wanted to charge you hundreds to work around. While you've got it out, run your finger inside that rubber grommet and give the hose a gentle squeeze. If the rubber is cracked, hard, or brittle, that's a few more dollars to replace, and it matters, because a leak there causes the very same rough idle. You are now doing what a good mechanic does, and most drivers never learn. And you did it in your driveway on a Saturday. I did this on my own truck the week after that conversation. 10 minutes. The valve was black and silent as a stone. I cleaned it, dropped in a fresh one for about $8, and started the engine. The idle smoothed out before I even shut the hood. The shutter at the light was gone. $900 of estimate for a repair that started with an $8 part and a can of cleaner I already had on the shelf. But here's the thing that kept nagging at me, and it's the reason I kept digging even after my truck ran right. How would I ever know if it was clogging up again before it started robbing me? I didn't want to pull that valve every month, and that question led me to the oldest and best trick I found in this entire investigation, the one I promised you at the start. Here is the secret, and I want you to hear where it comes from, because that's what makes it real. When I went looking through old material to understand this system, I got my hands on descriptions from service and shop manuals of the late 1940s and the 1950s, the era when mechanics still understood crankcase ventilation as a living, breathing system and not a sealed box. And in that old knowledge, from the men who serviced these engines by hand and by feel long before any computer, there is a test so simple it feels like a trick. It requires nothing but a single sheet of paper, and it tells you the health of your engine's breathing in about 30 seconds, without touching a single tool. Here's how you do it. Start your engine and let it warm up to normal temperature, idling. Then open the hood and find your oil filler cap. That's the cap you unscrew to add oil, right on top of the valve cover. Take it off. Now tear off a small piece of ordinary paper. An index card or a scrap of a paper towel works fine, and lay it flat over the open hole where the cap was. Then just watch. If your ventilation system is healthy and breathing the way it should, within a few seconds that piece of paper will be gently sucked down and held against the opening. That soft, steady pull is the vacuum of a system doing its job, pulling the fumes out, keeping the crankcase clean, keeping the pressure where it belongs. That's the sound of a healthy engine, made visible. But if that paper flutters, or worse, if it gets pushed up and away from the hole, puffing at you in little breaths, that is blow-by. That is pressure backing up because the valve is clogged and the crankcase can't breathe out. That is your engine telling you, in a language older than any scanner, that its lungs are filling up. And now you know to go pull that valve and clean it before it costs you a seal, a gasket, or a fortune in sludge damage. Think about how remarkable that is. No diagnostic fee. No warning light waiting until the damage is already done. Just a scrap of paper and 30 seconds, reading the health of your engine the way a country doctor once read a pulse. This knowledge existed. It was written down plainly for the men who kept America's engines running after the war. Then it got pushed aside, buried under computers and service packages, and the simple fact that nobody makes money teaching you to read your own engine with a piece of paper. But it was never lost. It was kept alive by the people who never stopped fixing what they own with their own two hands, the men behind the barns, the ones who shook that valve next to my ear. And now you hold it too. I do that paper test on every vehicle I own, twice a year, spring and fall. It takes less time than checking the mail, and I have never gone back to a shop for a mystery power problem since. So let me leave you with this. That little valve, that scrap of paper, that quiet moment behind a barn, none of it is really about a car. It's about the feeling of standing in that fluorescent lobby being told a number you couldn't argue with, in a language you weren't allowed to understand, and being made to feel foolish about a machine you drive every single day. That feeling isn't yours to carry anymore. You just took a piece of it back. You can open your own hood, read your own engine, and fix the small thing before it becomes the big thing, the way people did for generations before anyone thought to charge them for the privilege. That's who you are, if you've watched this far. You're the kind of person who would rather trust your own hands and a little honest know-how than hand your money and your judgment to somebody who's counting on you not to look. That instinct is right. Hold on to it. Now I want to hear from you, and I mean this specifically. Go do the paper test on your own car this weekend and come back and tell me, did that paper get sucked down flat and healthy, or did it flutter and puff back up at you? Tell me the year and make of your vehicle and what your paper did. I read these, and other folks reading the comments will learn from what you find. And tell me where you're watching from while you're at it. I'm always amazed how far this reaches. If something in here made you realize how much you've been paying to not know simple things, then come along with the rest of us who are digging this old, practical, hands-on knowledge back out of the ground before it's gone for good. This isn't about a channel. It's about a whole way of taking care of what you own that somebody decided you didn't need anymore. Because the next thing I pulled loose from those same old manuals is a trick for reading your engine oil, just by putting a single drop on a piece of paper and watching what it does overnight. It'll tell you things about your engine's health that most people pay a lab to find out. I'll show you that one next. Don't miss it. Before you go, let me tell you where this goes next. Inside the plain living circle, I take you through the full cleaning walkthrough, the valve and that paper test, step by step in your own driveway. You can ask me your own question. A real person, me, answers you, not a machine. You belong here with us. Just point your phone's camera at the code on the screen. Cancel any time with one click. Come on in. Now that valve is clean, there's one small sensor causing that rough, shaky idle you feel at every stoplight. Let me show you how to clean it in just 9 minutes. It's starting right here.